Thank you, Helen, and thank you everyone for that very warm welcome. And I do thank you for the invitation to speak here today. I'm looking forward to it. Susan, thank you for that wonderful acknowledgement of our traditional owners, and let me also add my voice to acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. It's upon their ancestral lands that this place is built, so I do pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge that these fires have had a profound impact on those ancestral lands and many, many cultural sites. And even now, we still don't understand the breadth of the damage that has been done to these sites. Helen did touch on my links to the northeast of Victoria. As some of you may know, I was a superintendent at Wangaratta during the northeast fires of 2003. Now, many spoke about these fires as being as big as we had seen for many, many years. But looking at what we've gone through in the last couple of months, those fires have been absolutely dwarfed. And I know when I was appointed to this role, I made the observation that perhaps we're seeing the new normal with these bushfires. I really hope we're not, but certainly in the last decade or so, the breadth and the fierceness of these fires has been very, very worrying. Could I also just mention again my police background? My former police minister's here today, so Pat, it's wonderful to be sitting next to you. Nice not to have to call you minister, but Pat. And also Peter Dickshay. I don't know how many of you know Peter, but Peter used to be a sergeant up at Corryong until he retired, and I'm really pleased, Peter, to see you now involved in the recovery process. So thanks for your continued work and support for your community. Great job. So I've been given 15 minutes to try and capture a part of my role. So certainly over the last week or so, I've been trying to understand how I actually capture in 15 minutes the challenges that we're facing and have faced. I will give it my best shot, but as many of you do know, it's been enormously challenging. The slide there you see gives a very quick snapshot. 5 lives lost and in Victoria, many more in New South Wales. I think we can thank our emergency service workers for their response and preparedness coming into this fire season. Otherwise, these losses could have been far, far worse. So I salute each and every one of those people involved. We've lost 405 residents, 653 non-residential premises, 1.56 million hectares of land has been burnt, and any of you that have had the opportunity to be on visit some of these fire grounds, the amount of damage is just absolutely staggering to our bushland. 7,000 stock have died, and I'm hearing estimates of over 1 billion native animals have been killed during these fires, and I also understand we may well have lost a number of species in these fires. So they're enormous, and as I say, nothing like I've seen before. So let me just touch on my role. About 7 weeks ago, the Premier asked me if I would chair Bushfire Recovery Victoria. The role for me is a listening role. It's a visiting role to try and get to all the fire grounds, to talk to all the people involved. So I'm talking to individuals, businesses, local government, communities, trying to understand some of the challenges that communities are facing. I then feed that back to Bushfire Recovery Victoria so they can address some of the gaps. And on a daily basis when I'm in the field, both my team and myself report back to the Premier on a nightly basis about what we're seeing working and what we're seeing is not working. So it's a humbling role. It's a role that I'm very, very proud to be undertaking. Now, let me be a little bit presumptuous here and just touch on what I see your role. And that is, again, perhaps a little presumptuous for me, but what I'm hearing is communities want their voice to be heard. Now, you're the people that voice can be heard through. We know that rebuilding can only happen if local ownership is allowed, and local voices actually mean local solutions. Recovery is not a job we can do by ourselves. It's a job we must do together. So today, as you work through a number of sessions, I'm hopeful you'll address a number of questions. How do we rebuild better as a community? And whilst bricks and mortar are really, really important, how do we rebuild individuals? How do we rebuild families? And how do we rebuild communities? And as leaders, I'd hope you'll ask yourself, what is my obligation to my local community? I'll be interested to hear some of these conversations. So the slide you've got up there at the moment is some of the conversations that I've heard over the last 6 weeks. So we've visited 19 communities so far. We've spoken to community members, community groups, local government, business people, businesses from micro businesses to very large businesses, business representative groups, government leaders, public sector leaders, politicians, donors, and those wanting to help. The challenges we've heard are very, very complex. And what you're seeing there is by no means exhaustive. And whilst the challenges are complex, some of the solutions are even more complex. So let me just step through those issues one by one. So in the early days, we were hearing about the need to immediately clean up. And people were saying that they were looking at their burned houses and they wanted it cleared and fixed up so that the pain of remembering these fires would disappear. And to be honest, that resonated with me. But wiser people in the room know that this is not necessarily the case. So some of these people, whilst they were keen to clean up very, very quickly, over the next few days or weeks, started to reflect on, was this a matter of doing it quickly, or was it a matter of just thinking quietly and calmly about what the future looked like? And more of these people moved into this space. They actually wanted to go back to their homes. They wanted to try and save some of their remnants of their previous life. So as I say, as we heard more and more of this, people were wanting to slow down and pull up the process which we were trying to move quite quickly. This was a lesson for me, a really important lesson for me. No one circumstance is the same. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's circumstances are different. Everyone has got a different process they need to get through on this recovery process. The next stories we heard an awful lot about, and this is what Helen did touch on, and it's around small businesses. The impact on small businesses, particularly those not necessarily affected by the flames, is quite extraordinary. The devastation that we heard from businesses affected by the closure of the Princes Highway and other roads, and the effect on their livelihood, again, was staggering. There were micro businesses, and I like to retell the story of the Cabbage Tree Cafe at Cabbage Tree, a tiny, tiny business whose business was basically closed for 6 weeks whilst the Princes Highway was cleared. One can only imagine the impact on a small business like that. Then there's the Alpine Resorts, who've been heavily impacted over the same period of time, and what's that done to their business. Last week I had the opportunity of visiting a trucking company who was working very hard to diversify their business. They had been in logging, and they were moving to a renewable business where they were starting to move parts of wind farms. But part of the transition was relying on the logging business to fund the move to the new business. Unfortunately, the fires up the entire East Coast put a stop to every one of their contracts. So that transition's now stopped. In the first week, they've laid off 7 people. 2 weeks later, they laid off 20 people. In a couple of weeks' time, they're talking about laying off the remainder of their staff, a total of 40 people. Now, people in this room are from regional communities. You think of any regional community that has that amount of people all of a sudden unemployed. Think about the impact on those 30 families. Think about the impact on the communities. Think about the impact on regional Victoria as this story is repeated over and over and over again. It's staggering. So the next issue we heard a lot about was the mental health impact of this disaster. And to be honest, I found this profound and enormously challenging with some of the stories we have heard. Now, people in this room today will be or are absolutely blessed to have Dr. Rob Gordon here, who'll talk through a number of issues with many of you. Rob has been involved in the impacts on people's mental health across disasters for many years, and is regarded as one of the very best in Australia in this space, if not internationally. So I encourage you to take advantage of Rob's enormous knowledge, and I suspect he'll be able to capture some of these challenges around mental health issues far better than I will. But let me just put this in some context. We've learnt lessons from the past that not everyone is good at putting their hands up for help, for financial assistance and support. Now, Rob's done some thinking around this and helped me understand this a little better. But there are a number of issues. People feel enormously proud. People have never ever asked for a government handout in their life, are now put in a place in a position where they may need to ask for, and they simply don't want to ask for help. People are overwhelmed by the bureaucratic process, and all we talk about trying to streamline these processes and make it easier for people. People still find it enormously difficult to work their way through the system. They feel intimidated by filling out government forms, which are sometimes complex and hard to follow, particularly if people are under stress. People who aren't feeling as well as they might simply aren't in a good position to making long-term decisions about their lives or their livelihoods. I'm also told that trauma can be exacerbated by the government's application processes and actually add to the damage that's been caused to their lives. So it requires a great deal of emotional energy to get over the top of many of these issues. These fires feel very different to me when I'm thinking about mental health issues from a number of levels as well. I'll try and be good, Kath. I think the big hook's coming out. So a decade or so ago, I don't recall generational farmers sitting around the table in tears talking about the impacts of these fires with that sense of helplessness, that whether trying to decide whether to rebuild or leave, or whether they can face another fire. We're hearing stories of school children not wanting to be separated from their mothers and their families when the time comes to go back to school. They're not sleeping, there are behavioural problems. Business people who are running family businesses that have been in the family for generations. They're suffering enormous feelings of guilt, the likelihood of perhaps losing the business under their watch. On and on it goes. So, as I say, it's enormously challenging in the mental health space. The next piece around the local voice, local led, again, this is very much learnings from the 2011 bushfires. And again, 2013 bushfires. Again, there's really good stories starting to pop up. We did hear the other day of our version of the butcher baker and the candlestick maker for local businesses working together to create a staple box where people could actually buy these boxes, and then they're actually given to people in the communities that need help. Again, a really nice way of supporting local businesses and also supporting people in need. And talking to Matt from the Australian Centre of Rural Entrepreneurship a little earlier today, I know there's some thinking being done in this space in the northeast in recent times. Just quickly, we often heard about people having difficulty finding help in this process. So BRV's engagement model includes a web page, a targeted social media campaign, an 1800 number, local media, state and national media, all designed to make sure people understand their processes. But going into the community, we heard over and over and over again that people didn't know where to get help. So we're continually trying to reshape this and fine-tune it. And in the not too distant future, we will have face-to-face access in many of the affected communities. Will actually give people the ability to look people in the face and have those conversations. But what we are learning is not one model fits everyone. So there needs to be those multiple efforts. Nearly there, Kath. So looking back, looking forward, these are some of the things we learned from the Black Saturday fires, and again, it feeds into much of what Helen mentioned. There needs to be frequent communication with communities. There needs to be empowerment of local leadership. Our processes need to be agile, but they need to be structured as well. Not one size fits all approach. And we need to trust the communities. The answers are actually in the community, in this room today, about what can be done to resolve the challenges. So let me just finish up by making a couple of observations. The state's been decimated by these fires, and again, anyone that's been and seen the damage can't help but be taken aback by the sheer magnitude of it. Last week when we were travelling in Gippsland, we were starting to see some of the shoots of green coming through the blackened forests. And as we're visiting communities, we're starting to see some of those green shoots also appearing with individuals, with businesses and communities. So there's a little to celebrate with that, but still much work to be done. So today I've come with absolutely no answers at all for you. I think this is your role to work with communities to find out the solutions that best suit them. So your challenge today is to discuss and develop strategies that how best you can connect with and support your affected communities. Many of the answers will be in the past experiences of 2003 and 2013. but most of the answers will be in the communities that you represent. So let me finish off by just making one observation. Your challenges are immense, but now is the time for you as community leaders to simply step up and make a real difference. Thank you very much.